Welcome, Mark Leach. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I'd love for you to share about who you are and about your organization, Never Again Is Now. Tell us a little bit about you.
Wow. Well, thank you for having me on your show, and I hope that you and your listeners find this helpful. A little bit about me. Well, I now am the CEO and co-founder of an organization called Never Again Is Now, but my story starts way back in Germany and in Africa in the 1930s when my mother and her family fled Nazi Germany in 1938, ended up in southern Africa. Fast forward a couple of decades, my mum married my dad, who was a white Catholic South African, so I grew up Catholic and Jewish, had an experience of God. As a teenager, ended up as an Anglican, came to Australia, and I've been an Anglican pastor for 30 years. And after October the 7th, I realized that there was a need in Australia to help people understand what was really going on with the conflict in Israel, the rising antisemitism, hatred of Jewish people here in Australia, and to mobilize Australia so we didn't repeat the mistakes of Germany in the 1930s. So we set up this organization, and it's my great privilege now to look around and go, wow, there's this national movement of people who are working to protect the Jewish community by renewing our commitment to Western civilization more broadly.
Okay, I'm going to pause there because you did a wonderful summary of your life and your family, but you're like many cultures in the one person. There's Australian, there's Jewish, there's South African, there's so many things.
Yeah.
And then you became an Anglican minister,
Yeah.
and then you've given that up to do this. So there's a wonderful movie in that. You've
Sure.
talked about that before.
Yes, it's either going to be a horror movie or a comedy. We haven't worked out which yet. That's right. Maybe even a tragedy.
Yeah, I think you can achieve both.
A rom-com.
Yeah. I didn't know about you directly, but I did after October 7 and after things started happening in Australia that seemed very un-Australian to me. I found out about a rally that was happening at the Domain in Sydney called Never Again Is Now, and I came to that with some friends and family, and it was so amazing to see Australians of all belief systems, like all such diversity coming and going. No, we protect Australians, and it just spoke to my heart, to my conscience, and that's when I started researching who's the founder of this, what's happening here, and then I reached out to you, and that's how we got to know each other. Could you talk a little bit about that moment of like what changed once you started witnessing what was happening on the steps of Opera House?
Yeah, sure. So like many people, I watched the events of October 7th unfold sort of almost live on Twitter and was just in a state of shock. And then that was on the Saturday, the 7th of October. On the morning of the 9th, so the Monday morning, my daughter Freya, who you've met, Freya was at Sydney Uni then, and she called me and said, hey, Dad, the pro-Palestinian sort of socialist alliance on campus are planning a rally in the city centre against Israel. And I thought to myself, that's just an extraordinary thing to do and appalling. I mean, the blood hadn't yet dried in southern Israel. They're still chasing terrorists around. And the IDF hadn't gone into Gaza yet. There was nothing to protest against except the existence of the state of Israel and to show support for a terror organization. So I called up the police, Central Command in Sydney, and I said, I'm an Anglican minister. I've heard this rally's happening. It's unauthorized. I'm planning to organize a counter-protest. And they said, well, Mr. Leach, we are encouraging the Jewish people, the Jewish community, to stay out of the city center for their own safety. We can't guarantee your safety if you come in. And if you do come in and try and do anything, we'll arrest you in order to prevent a breach of the peace. So I thought that was appalling. So I decided to go ahead with what I was going to do. So I put on a clerical shirt and I wrapped up an Israeli flag in my squash bag. And I stood on the steps of the Anglican Cathedral in Sydney, which is directly opposite the town hall. And in the square between the town hall and the cathedral is where these rallies all start. And I watched them start, and it was just, the atmosphere was just full of hatred, just so thick with hatred of Israel and of Jewish people. So I took out my flag and I stood on the steps of the cathedral and I waved an Israeli flag. And I wanted to take a stand for Australia to say, at this time, we cannot give control of the center of our city to a group of jihadists supporting, rapists supporting, terrorists supporting people who want to drive the Jews out of the center of Sydney and occupy it for their support of what happened on October the 7th. It was just appalling. So I waved the flag, 1,000 eyes turned on me, a bunch of keffiyeh-wrapped thugs sort of chased me out of the square. I beat a hasty retreat and then ran up Bathurst Street and hid behind a police van up on George Street while the police dispersed the sort of 15 or 20 or so thugs who were chasing me. And that changed everything for me, because it became clear to me then, and in the aftermath of it, as we saw that rally then unfold, they went down to the Opera House, they burned Israeli flags, they had horrific chants, it made the international news. But our government let it happen. They kept the Jews out and they gave the center of our city over to a bunch of thugs. And I thought, you know what, we have to mobilize Australians to say, no, we don't want that kind of hatred here. We don't want to bring those divisions here. And we have to stand alongside the Jewish community. Because in Germany in the 1930s, I'm not sure if you know this, but it was a very Christian country. About 20% of the churchgoers supported Hitler, about 20% opposed Hitler, but the middle 60% just were quiet and didn't want to get involved, didn't want to be political. And so what happened then was Sundays became the most popular day for Jews to be rounded up in Germany in the late 30s and early 40s, because that was the day all the Christians in their villages were in church. And so they would round up their neighbors, they would sing their hymns to drown out the sounds of their Jewish neighbors being taken off to gas chambers.
Oh.
So I thought, this is what we have to make sure never happens in Australia, that we have to make anti-Semitism, the persecution of Jewish people, unthinkable in this country, because it's un-Australian. And the way to go about that is to renew our commitment to being a liberal democracy founded on Judeo-Christian values and principles. So that afternoon of October the 9th was the genesis of everything that's happened on the other side of it.
Yeah. There's something when you said that the police said to you, for your safety, and also telling the Jewish community for their safety to stay home. And I understand that they're doing it because they're basing it on the laws that are in place. I understand that their understanding is, okay, we're just obeying the law. The law says this is what we need to say. But there's something about that request that sounds very German to me. That's the kind of thing that we're saying to the Germans: for your safety, stay over there. For your safety, stay here. For that, I feel like that's how it began. And if there's something is happening in Australia where they need to say a group needs to stay home for their safety because so and so is protesting, we need to have peaceful protests.
Yeah.
Why is anyone being told to stay home for their safety? We should be able to feel safe to go out on the street, even if we have opposing views to whatever protests are happening.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary thing to tell the Jewish community to stay out of the city because they can't keep them safe. It would be like saying to the LGBT community, hey, stay out of King's Cross because we can't keep you safe.
Yes.
Or, this is an example I've used, that it's like saying, imagine if, it's like saying to women, hey, stay home at night because we can't protect you from rapists. Well, no, the job of the police is to keep the city safe. So you can't blame the victims, which is what it felt like and what it feels like. And we've seen, unfortunately, with a lot of policing, both here and around the world, in the Western world, that it's much easier to keep the Jews away, or the pro-Israel groups, out of the way, and because the police, and allow the pro-Palestinian hard left and Islamist mobs to control the streets, because there's just more of them. And I go, well, that's not right. We should all be safe and free in this country. That's what we're built on,
Yeah.
And we can disagree with each other. I mean, I'm a massive fan of free speech. So I'm like, you want to walk around Sydney and say that and insult Christians and insult Jesus and insult Jews, feel free to do that. But then we should also be free to walk around and express our views in support of Israel, in support of the Jewish people. And the job of the state is to ensure the safety and security of everyone.
Yeah. I keep saying this in my podcast, and I'm going to keep saying it. This is not just about defending Jewish people because they're Jewish people. You don't have to have a Christian background, a Jewish background, or whatever it is where you think, okay, this group always defends Jewish people. This is about we're defending Australian people. If there's a belief system in our Australian democratic free country that says another group needs to be finished, annihilated, they need to stop existing, that doesn't belong here. So I would be doing the same thing on my podcast if someone was against Filipinos in the same way as they are against the Jewish people.
Yeah.
I would be saying the same thing if the police said to the black people or the Christian people or atheists or Buddhists, for your safety, don't come out on the street. That's appalling. I'm not blaming the police. I'm saying we need to fix something and change something in our political system that even allows for that to be a policy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. In Australia, we tolerate a level of we tolerate a way in which Jewish people are treated that we wouldn't tolerate for any other population group or minority. So, for example, for years now, Jewish schools all have armed guards protecting the kids.
Horrifying.
Most Australians don't know that.
Yes.
There's no other population group, no other school where you have to have armed guards to keep your kids safe. Every synagogue has armed guards.
Not just now.
No, this has been for years.
For years.
And Australians go, well, that's just, we just kind of accept that. And it's, again, the example I use, imagine if every time there was an Indigenous sporting event, you had to have armed guards to keep our Indigenous community safe. Or if there was if there was an LGBT nightclub, a gay nightclub having an event, and you have to have armed guards, security screening to stop them being attacked. So that's what's going on, and has been going on in Australia for years. And of course, the question that we have to ask is, where does that level of hatred of the Jewish community come from? How has it got into Australia, and how do we get it out of Australia so that Jews, like everybody else, are safe and free in this country? And those are difficult conversations to have. The roots and the origin of antisemitism. Of course, now they hide their hatred of Jewish people. Not all, but significant people hide it by saying, "Well, we're not anti-Jewish. We're just anti-Israel. We're anti-Zionist." And that's given them. They give themselves license then to be viciously racist.
What does that mean when they say that?
Well, I think you'd have to ask them directly, whoever's saying it. From my perspective, I think what they're saying is, we hate the state of Israel, we hate Western civilization, we hate the Jewish people, but we can't say all of that. So what we've got to do is create the narrative that, tell the story that Israel is this violent, oppressor, genocidal, baby-killing, terrible regime. And of course, it's that we oppose, not Jews. I mean, some of my best friends are Jews, you'll hear them say. But what the state of Israel is doing, what Netanyahu is doing, and it's crazy. So it's crazy at so many levels, because actually what they're full of is hatred for the Jewish people. I mean, there are documents from both the radical left and Islam that are, thoroughly anti-Semitic as well as anti-Zionist.
Is it because they've done something, or is it just because they were born?
Well, the great offense for the state of Israel is to exist as a Jewish state in the Middle East. I mean, this is an unthinkable proposition in terms of Islamic theology, and so they have to eradicate the state of Israel. I mean, you listen to the Hamas Charter. I mean, this is the Hamas Charter. Hamas is just very clear. They don't hide it at all. Their goal is to eradicate the Jews from the Middle East and then eradicate the Jews from the world.
How are Western people going, well, Hamas is standing up for the people? I don't think they're even standing up for their own people.
Well, we see just even in the last week where they've brutally tortured and murdered the handful of Gazans who protested against Hamas in the last week. So, I mean, they're a vicious, brutal death cult, and they don't hide what they believe. I think what's going on is this. I think the spiritual and sociological seeds of Jew hatred are so deeply woven into the human psyche that that it's just there below the surface, and it's been given license to bubble up. And the way it's bubbled up is in this framing that everybody has. We've been primed to believe this because the whole world is seen in terms of the categories of oppressed and oppressor. It's this old Marxist narrative that the world can be understood in terms of a movement between those who are oppressed and those who are oppressing them. It used to be capital and labor. Now that was the environment and the world itself. It's colonial oppressors and indigenous inhabitants. And in Israel, it's the Jews and the Arabs, or the Israelis and the Palestinians. And so that framing means it's very, like, the whole world is neatly understood in those categories. And if you want to be a good, virtuous person in Australia, you have to side with the oppressed, right? And then you've got to and then resistance is always justified. So Hamas is a resistance movement, and the extraordinary violence of October 7 and before is justified because they're overthrowing the tyrannical oppressors, who in this case are Israel, and Israel and the Jews of Israel are the kind of epitome of the worst of white colonial settlers. So you have to side with them. And so then you have to discount what Hamas say theologically. And so most Australians aren't religious and theologically informed. So when they say, well, theologically, God will only return and heaven will only come when every Jew has been killed, they go, well, that's just religion. That's just that's what crazy people think. No one really believes that. Because when you look around in Australia, no one really acts out their theology. I mean, it's a private thing you do on a Sunday or a Saturday, but it doesn't affect how you live the rest of your lives. Well, no, it does.
It actually does.
It actually does. Hamas are theologically driven, and they don't hide it.
And when that comes to Australia, and there's little clumps of groups and ghettos and all of that are created based on that ideology and philosophy and policy, what's that going to do when it starts growing, when it's being preached and spoken in secret places? And now it's not secret anymore. Now there's school children chanting it.
Yeah, globalize the intifada. Because that ideology has found a happy hunting ground or a great landing place amongst the sort of middle class, private school educated, hard left students on our campuses and in our schools. So you've got problems of the ethnic enclaves in Australia where they believe that for various cultural and historic reasons, but mainstream kind of, for a better word, white Australia have become the useful idiots who believe that because they believe they actually don't know much about the Middle East. It fits with their overall narrative and their desire to be a good person. And it brings extraordinary division into this country. So this is the problem, right? So we have, and that division is being fueled by external actors as well. So there is a massive information war being conducted against us. These ideas and the dividing Western cultures against themselves has been a strategy of Russia. The pre-Tsarist Russian Secret Service wrote the infamous tract, The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, in 1903, because they understood that using the Jews as a scapegoat to divide societies was incredibly powerful. So Russia, China, Iran, Qatar are putting billions of dollars over decades into dividing Western countries and Western culture and civilization from within.
Yep.
And they've been remarkably successful at that, at a whole number of levels, on the left and with the Islamist agenda. And we're naive and we don't understand we're in a war. And the war is not just in Israel or the Middle East or Sudan or Iraq or Syria. There's an information war being fought here in Australia and in Canada and in the United States and the United Kingdom, the goal of which is to divide us, because a house divided against itself cannot stand, and to erode our confidence in our nation state, in the Australian project, in being a tolerant, inclusive Western democracy.
Yeah. That tolerance, that word is such an amazing word, but it can be used against us because it sometimes implies we have to tolerate everything, and we don't. In order to be able to live harmoniously, there are some things you must never tolerate. there are some minorities you must never defend and protect.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds insane because even I was raised to go, oh, minority, go to their defense. Minority almost paints this picture of bully and a little victim. That's the bully sometimes.
Yeah.
And they're condescending and they're deceptive and they're narcissistic. So you have to be careful which minority you're going to defend. You're going to put your energy, time, and money and blood and sweat and tears into. And I do think and talk a lot about just us everyday Australians like myself. I don't in any way claim to be clever in politics and alliances. I know that. But I do believe that first and foremost, we need to defend and make this a very neutral ground as Australians, that any Muslim can come here and feel safe. Any Jewish person can come here, North Korean, South Korean, any atheist, whatever belief system, you can have a conversation. And I can go, Mark, at this point, I don't actually agree with you about what's happening overseas. We can have that point of view. And I understand who we support, and I understand political alliances are necessary. Governments must have alliances with other countries that support, defend them, and vice versa. I get those things, and that's a very important conversation to be had, and that's not something I want to kind of draw away from, because I do have a belief that if I'm born and raised in Iran to be a Muslim and left, and I'm a born again Christian by choice, I believe I can go to Israel like many have, and I'll be fine. I'll have a wonderful time there. I'll be allowed to go in and out. But I'm pretty sure if I go back to the current state of my place of birth in Iran, I wouldn't come back. I don't think I'll come back unless I'm in a coffin. Even that, I don't know. Or a lot of the severely Islam, like imagine if I went to Gaza now. I don't think I'll come back in one piece. No. I think there'll be, there's a belief that there's a great reward in heaven for anyone who kills me.
Yes.
So there's those alliances to be had with nations that are democratic, that allow for freedom to a certain extent, I hope. But I really want to concentrate I really want to encourage Australians. This must be a safe zone for everyone. No Jewish person should be told, don't go out into the streets, for your own safety. I do also want to touch on, it's insane for me, the life change you had from a minister to this. How does it feel? Are you happy having left that position? Because it's not easy being a minister.
Look, you only work one day a week, it's a piece of cake, you're invisible 6 days, incomprehensible on the 7th. Well, look, before we do that, I just wanted to say, I wanted to go back to how we make this safe. So here's a metaphor I use, because the problem with what you've just said, and if you critique, say, Islam, the problem is everyone goes, you're just racist, right? I mean, it's harder to level that accusation at you, or you're Islamophobic, or you whatever. So here's the metaphor I use to help myself and others think through how we build a safe place for everybody in Australia. And it's this: if you imagine, I don't know if you've ever been to a buffet. You've eaten at a buffet, right?
Yeah.
And you go, okay, there's you go to a buffet at a restaurant or on a cruise ship or a hotel or whatever. There's a whole array of foods on the table.
Yep.
And generally, not everyone eats everything. You pick the bits of the buffet that you like. So I like the meat. You like the vegetables. Someone else likes the seafood, and you eat what you like. So imagine Islam, the religion of Islam, is like a buffet, and there are all kinds of dishes that Islam dishes up. And we could name some nice ones, like say your prayers. There's a God who's in control of the world. Go to mosque. I don't know. Yeah, and it's a religion of peace. It's a religion of peace, but we can talk about that. So then you go, okay, these are the dishes that when you come to Australia and you eat those dishes, as it were, as a Muslim, everyone goes, that's great. That just fits in. It's fantastic. Problem is, in Islam, there are a bunch of other dishes on the table as well, aren't there, that are more problematic, like jihad is the highest form of spiritual life in Islam. So, and that it's the duty of every Muslim to work towards a global caliphate, to expand the rule of Allah, that peace will only come as everyone either becomes Muslim or is killed or lives as a dhimmi. So these are dishes on the plate. And so another dish might be, dawah. The only reason to come to Australia as a Muslim, to a country like Australia, is to expand the influence of Islam by whatever means possible. Okay. Now, thankfully, most Muslims don't eat from those dishes, the jihadist dish.
No,
they leave it. So my brother converted to Islam. He just ate from the dishes that were very acceptable with the culture he was in Cape Town, right? So my view is what we need to do in Australia is, and by the way, this works for all religions. I mean, take the Catholic religion. One of the dishes on the Catholic buffet is no contraception. Most Catholics go, I won't eat from that dish. I want to limit the size of my family. I know the Pope says I shouldn't have contraception, but, we'll use contraception happily. Okay. So we all do that in every religion. Now, the problem, like most clergy, whether you're a sheikh or a priest or a pastor, is to try and say, well, to be authentically this or that, you've got to eat all these dishes or this particular dish or whatever it is. In Australia, what we need to say to our Muslim friends is, when you live in Australia, these are the dishes that you can eat from off the buffet of Islam. And these are the dishes that you can't eat from. And then people will say to me, but Mark, that's racist. That's judging their culture. That's judging their religion. How can you be so, how can you discriminate against them? And to which the answer is, do you know we already do that? And they go, why is that, Mark? And I go, well, because one of the dishes on Islam, on offer, is the age at which women can get married in Islam, which is what, under Sharia. What age can you marry a woman in Islam?
I'm going to say 9, but it has been practiced younger than that.
Yes. So, say 9. Iraq has just legalized the age of marriage is 9. When you come to Australia as a Muslim, you are not allowed to eat off that dish. You will end up in jail. So we already discriminate. We already say, no. In Australia...
Discriminate?
Yeah, absolutely. We already say you can't do that, right? So what we need in Australia is it's the same, say, for example, with polygamy. So in Islam, you can, if you're a man, you can have many wives and you can take lots of women as slaves, conquered. If you could bring your Yazidi slaves over to Australia, sex slaves over to Australia, perhaps, if you immigrated here. And we say, no, you can't. We'll put you in jail if you do that, because we understand in Australia, whatever your religious or secular buffet is, you can only eat off the dishes that fit within Australia. So the conversation to have to build a tolerant, inclusive, safe place is to thoughtfully define what it is that we can all agree to live with.
Yeah.
And then exclude and take off the table those things that destroy our unity. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I just wanted to say...
That's really good. Thank you for doing that. That's a really beautiful analogy. Can I confirm that what you're saying is the reason we exclude some things is because we're trying to make sure that it is a safe space and free space for everybody? Because as soon as you have, let's go with the child marriage stuff, that excludes the ability and the freedom and the safety of children.
Correct.
If we allow for that. So,
and it's at odds with the moral and ethical framework that has shaped our culture and civilization, which we all take as self-evident. It's rooted in the scriptures. It's the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian scriptures together that have given us this moral vision of life. And we should all, and our society works, the genius of our nation state of Western civilization is we have these shared values that we don't often think about. They're just unconscious, but they're very real. They're enshrined in our law. But we need to reflect on those and be conscious and confident in them, that it is a better way to organize life for women and children when you don't have child marriage.
Yeah.
That's a really good thing. Colonialism isn't all bad. The British in India stopped the practice of burning the widows. When a high caste man died in India, historically his widow was burnt alongside him. And the British stopped that. Now, that seems to me a really good thing to do. Slavery is another example. We don't want that in Australia. We think slavery is bad. That came out of our Judeo-Christian culture. It was Christians who eradicated slavery for the first time in human history. A civilization said, we will not practice slavery. We don't want slavery in Australia. So, okay, well, how are we going to make sure it doesn't come to Australia? Well, we have to go back to our roots, have these conversations, and cast a vision of what the good life is and how we can work together and how we can live together. Because the challenges to our social cohesion and getting along are only going to get greater. We're in a demographic crisis. We're not reproducing enough. So the only way we're going to survive in this country is by importing people from the rest of the world. So as we do that, we've got to be thoughtful about what is it they bring to this country so that we can all be safe and free. And the point at which, and now I'll go to Israel. Israel is a great example of this. It is incredibly multi-ethnic. Like, this is the crazy lies and ignorance of people when they talk about Israel. They go, oh, it's an apartheid state, that somehow it's all Israel is all white Jews from Europe oppressing these plucky little indigenous people. We just had an event last night where we had 3 people from Israel, an Israeli Jew who lives in a predominantly Muslim area, a Druze Israeli, and a Palestinian Christian Israeli. Sounds like the setup for a joke. And they all get on amazingly well. And in Israel, they get along. It's a brilliant example. And if your listeners haven't been to Israel, do get there and experience what it's like. It's because they have a vision of a nation state, of the culture and values of Israel that are like pretty much identical to ours because they're built off the same script, the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. And they work together, and it's why Australia is so wonderful. I mean, you're a migrant here, I'm a migrant here. This is an incredible country, and we don't want to lose that.
No,
and we don't want to be divided against each other on the basis of our identity or our ethnicity or our sexual orientation. I mean, so that was a long story,
no,
a long way around
it.
Before getting to talk about what it's like to no longer be a clergyman.
Well, your interjection was amazing. It just puts me in mind to the fact that boundaries are not bad. Boundaries are very helpful, and boundaries bring clarity, bring a good, clear, united foundation. It doesn't mean we're a perfect nation.
No.
But the foundation, our policies, our laws, our morality stance, there's a few things we have to all agree on, and then we can build from that. But if we just say yes to everything, we say no to civilization. You can't say yes to everything.
Well, you really can't.
No.
I mean, anyone who's done any work with a therapist, as I have done over many years, you realize boundaries matter a lot because boundaries stop the evil coming into a system, and there is evil. And I like your point. You know, I'm not saying that Western civilization or Australia or Israel is perfect at all. I'm just saying it's better than the alternatives, and unashamedly so. And you go, it's amazing. Now, the problem is what we do here, because Australia is so deeply Christian, even if they're non-practicing Christians. And, you know, so the idea that we should stand alongside the oppressed, that's a deeply Christian vision of life, right? And so it's easy to point out the flaws and what's wrong with Australia. It's so easy to do that. But what you've got, and then
that's by the way, evidence of our democracy and our freedom that we can't even do that.
100%, and not get, and we can, you know, and you can change religions, you can criticize the government, you get freedom of speech, you know. This is a side note. What's fascinating is because we're losing our confidence in the underpinnings of Western civilization. We're losing our confidence in free speech as well. So, you know, the Premier of New South Wales got up and said, you know, we have to limit free speech in order for multiculturalism to be sustained in Australia, i.e. there are some things you can't say because you might offend this culture or that culture or the other culture.
Okay.
And I'm like, you know what? I think that's not right. I think we should be, the best way to learn how to get along with each other is to be able to talk honestly and robustly and respectfully about all the things on our respective buffets, and then enjoy eating together the things that we all agree we can eat together from.
See, I agree and disagree with that person's statement at the same time. I do believe we should be able to have open dialogue, but I still think that there should be a limitation, not to further multiculturalism, but to further our culture.
Yep.
I'm not interested in opening up the dialogue so that we can bring in and allow for every culture outside.
Right.
I'm interested in, I talked about this, I think on my initial J Perspective post, and I talked about multiculturalism and integration. Integration is really excited to find out what background, what's your culture, what are the other cultures that make you you, but within the framework of the Australian culture. That is the first thing that needs to be upheld. So I understand. I completely agree with you. I don't mean to be, I forgot what the word is, but just...
you can disagree with me. It's lots of people do, because you're allowed to be wrong. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I do appreciate that. No, it is true. There's going to be a lot of times I'm wrong, but we're having dialogue.
I'm joking.
No, it's true. But even freedom of speech has to have some limitations. We have to be able to go, no, your freedom of speech doesn't mean that you can preach the oppression of another person. There's some, I don't know what the limit, how we can limit that, but I'm just saying it doesn't seem okay for me to come and say, Mark, my freedom speech says that I would like to annihilate you and your family. I don't know is that freedom of speech?
That's very interesting. I think there are limits on freedom of speech for sure. I mean, classically, in the US, the First Amendment, freedom of speech is limited by using speech to cause harm, to real harm.
Physical harm.
And the example is calling out fire in a crowded cinema when there's no fire.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. In multiculturalism, what is interesting for me, though, two things. One, our problem is we don't understand when you say people, you've got to come to Australia and assimilate or integrate into Australia.
Integrate, yeah.
I don't think we've really understood. We don't have a sense of Australianness. Like, what is it that we're asking them to integrate into? And we've not been willing to have that conversation. And I think it's because we're irreligious, and the thing that unites us is just a pursuit of personal peace and prosperity, right? Yeah. And I don't think that's enough. Okay. I mean, like just getting rich and feeling at peace with yourself, those aren't sufficient. They're necessary but not sufficient conditions to unite people from around the world in a common life. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do is have a conversation. What is it, when you come to Australia, what exactly is it that you are coming to? And then, of course, freedom of speech works like this. When you come to Australia, if I come in as I want to have a conversation about exactly what is it on your buffet table. What is it? And what can you eat and what can't you eat? Mm-hmm. So you may come, you may want to marry a 9-year-old girl. Or there may be people within Australia, as there were in France, so key French intellectuals in the post-Second World War who argued in favor of sex with children, the minor attracted people who want to legalize pedophilia. Okay. So let's have a conversation about that.
I'll do my best without vomiting.
Yeah, that's, I mean, and your view, and then what you want to do is, and you want to have that conversation with great intellectual rigor, so you can expose how dangerous and damaging and wrong and out of step with reality those ideas are, and you go, that is off the table in Australia. Because otherwise, that's how laws function, right? Laws come about in a country when the British common law that is our heritage, when our courts basically have worked out over centuries what it is that we can all eat off the table. But we have to have that discussion because that's going to be under threat. Everyone's going to come here and our nebulous, unclear, we're all just inclusive and rich and happy and Australia is, being like, going to the beach and having a pie at the footy and, not killing each other. Like, that's not enough. Yeah. So I think we need, and it's not enough because actually we've been taught to actually despise and loathe our culture. There's a cringe about Western civilization, about truth, and we're all white colonial oppressors. And you go, no, the Australian project it's not perfect, but it's extraordinarily wonderful. And it has a dark history. Every nation state is formed through violence. Is what it is. Okay, so how do we build a great country going forward? So that's the discussion to have.
Yep.
Because it's very exciting as a migrant to be able to come here in a post-tribal meritocratic Australia.
Yeah. Absolutely.
built on British common law and our traditions and our history. And let's think about that and articulate that and be confident in that.
Yeah. Well, you weren't born here.
No, I was born in a village in Zambia.
When did you come here?
I came here in January 91. So I've been
How old were you?
33. I was 20.
20. Okay.
So I'm an African.
Yeah.
I'm a white African Jew, Catholic, Anglican. So, you know.
Are you okay?
Am I okay?
There's so many things there. Are you okay?
I'm okay. And you know what? Yeah, massively okay. I think, look, our identities, who we are, is always a complex mix of a whole variety of identities. Yeah. What I think is so bad about some of the trends in society is to try and divide us on the basis of one particular identity and then lump everyone into this. So all Jews are this, or all Muslims are this, or all Australians this, or all Indigenous people that. And you go, no. The beauty of our tradition is we're judged not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character.
Amen.
Like every individual, to quote Martin Luther King Jr., who's a Christian minister, and it's this biblical idea that every single person is made in the image of God. And is uniquely valuable, therefore, and
even Muslims, yep,
absolutely everyone. So, so irrespective that's actually what defines us.
Yeah,
made in the image of God, uniquely valuable. That includes. Now I'll get a little controversial here. That includes whether you're inside or outside the uterus. That includes whether you're intellectually handicapped or not. That includes whether you're an elderly person with dementia. You never lose that. And no matter what your religious or sexual orientation is, this is a extraordinary doctrine that is unique to the biblical worldview that has changed the world for the better. And we just take it for granted now. But it's precious and it's easily eroded. So we need to defend that. So I would say I will defend the value of. I've got into trouble for saying this in various groups. And so, every jihadist is made in the image of God.
Amen.
And that's never erased, even when they're raping and mutilating and torturing people on October the 7th. And in other contexts, I'd say, that's still evil. So we're made in the image of God, capable of extraordinary good, but also extraordinary evil.
All of us,
so Blaise Pascal said, we're both the glory and the garbage of the universe. And both of those are true. So every concentration camp guard would kill and torture during the day and go home and cuddle his kids and make love to his wife at night. And both are true.
Yeah.
And that's the genius of Christianity, or actually of the biblical worldview, not Christian. And we've got to guard that and cherish that and value that. From that, all our other doctrines of human rights are developed.
Yeah. There is nothing more amazing, more uniting, more beautiful and precious and worthy of honor and praise than the biblical teachings. I still have not found another. And I always say, as soon as I find something better, I'm converting.
Yeah.
As soon as I find something better, I will convert. I'm not attached to something just because I've said I believe in the path that Jesus Christ set for us.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to stick to it until, even if something's better. I haven't found something better yet.
Yeah.
Nothing else makes me love humanity more and protect our nature, protect people, protect freedom of speech, freedom of life for everyone. I don't care whether you're LGBT, whether you are atheist, whether you are Muslim. There's nothing else that has taught me that God is love for those people, no matter what they are, what they believe, and the outworkings of that and how that actually looks. I get so excited, but I don't want to make this podcast all of that more.
No. Well, because what matters in the end is living in reality, like the way the world lives. So a simple philosophical definition of truth is accuracy of representation of reality. So a statement is true if it accurately represents the nature of underlying reality.
Okay.
And so if Christianity is true, a religion is true to the extent to which it accurately represents the way the world really is. And of course, the thing about reality, it's what you run into when you're wrong. So if you have wrong ideas about the way the world is, it's actually going to damage you. So for example, I might think I have a I might think my car is full of petrol, and I'll go on a long drive through the desert, and I'll run out of petrol, and I'll die alone in the desert because my car was actually nearly empty. So I had a thought about the way the world was. It didn't correspond with reality. It got me into difficulty.
Okay.
I might think that gravity doesn't exist. Okay, so what happens? I jump off a tall building, and for the first half a second, it's great, and I'm free. Gravity doesn't exist. Look, it was all lies until I hit the bottom. Boom. And then I discover it's very, very painful and bad for me to work against reality. My view is the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian scriptures that then get wrapped up and shown perfectly what it looks like to be lived out in the person of Jesus, that is a description of the nature of underlying reality. So when I align myself with that, exactly what you say, I find that it works. And it's the best way to organize our lives. So I always say to everyone, atheists, and anyway, I say, imagine what the world would be like if everyone lived the way Jesus said we should live. And they go, well, it'd be heaven. Yeah.
I can't be caught crying on every episode. Sorry.
It's okay. Lots of people, I make lots of people cry.
You did.
for all kinds of reasons. Hopefully this is a good one.
No, this is definitely good.
It's a beauty. We can fix it in post-production.
I might have to edit all of this out, but I just cannot get over. Like, I first had an encounter of Jesus when I was 9, and I still to this day cannot get over how amazing he is, and what a servant, what an amazing, sacrificial, wonderful, uniting God he is. And I just desperately want everyone to have that peace and that confidence and that hope that is given by just knowing him and following. I can't get over it, Mark. Yeah. I mean, this is not a Christian podcast, but I can't get over it. I can't get over how amazing he is.
Yeah.
And I just want to freely give it to everyone.
Yeah.
Just get to know this beautiful, amazing God. No one else, no other leader, no other religion has offered what he offers.
Yeah.
Let me be your servant.
Yeah.
That's who he is, and he's the last person that should be our servant. Yeah. Anyway, Mark.
No, well, so look, my invitation to your listeners and to people generally is read the Bible as a document about how we should organize our lives together. You don't have to just read it like that. Like lots of the
like a novel.
Yeah, or a lot of the sort of the Greek philosophy that we read as great philosophical ethical readings were actually in their original are framed as religious dreams and as God speaking to people, but we read the Greek texts in that way, but discount the Bible because I know the Bible's about religion. Well, no. If you think about the Bible as like a description of how we should live and flourish in the world, just start with that and read the Gospels and you go, imagine if we all lived that way. And of course, Jesus was Jewish, so you have to, when you read the Gospel accounts, you're reading the story of a Jewish Torah observant rabbi wandering around Israel, talking to people about what God is doing in the world and how they should live. So just read it like that and see what it does.
Yeah.
And then compare the alternatives, right?
Yeah,
That's do a compare and contrast. And that's, and if you don't think it's true, that's okay, but at least examine it.
Yeah.
Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. And I think that's true. The unexamined faith is not worth having. The unexamined culture or civilization is not just that it's not worth having, it won't be preserved. We need to understand why it is we believe what we believe and how we can do it better.
How we can do it better, yeah, for sure. Can I just say, growing up, as I was reading the Bible in English, it's the same words. I mean, I'm not saying it's different, but in Persian, because it has that Middle Eastern feel and twist and context, it felt very different. Jesus was a lot more, when I read it in English, because maybe I was comparing it to the English culture and the way it was being represented, which is wonderful, but there was a lot more thee and thou and Jesus, but he's such an earthy, funny, sometimes sarcastic guy, and it's just, he's so relatable
Yeah,
for me.
yeah.
And there's a lot of stories that had the context helped me really understand the message when I read it in Persian.
Well, look, there's a New Testament scholar who's written a book called Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes, and he spent his life working in the Middle East, and when you read the parables, you read those stories of Jesus, you go, yeah, and through those eyes, it's amazing. And the problem with Christianity is we've de-Judaized Christianity. We've taken the Jewishness out of Jesus and out of the New Testament because the church, for 1800 years has been anti-Semitic. A fellow called Marcion originally he formalized this, right? We're going, the Old Testament, and it was regarded as a heresy, but Marcion's heresy is to say the Old Testament was old, it's done away with, the Jews are done away with, we don't need any of this, the Old Testament's the God of wrath, the New Testament's the God of love, so let's just do that. Another problem, you can't do that because you lose so much of, as you say, the earthiness, the Middle Easternness, the humanity of Jesus, and the fact that it works. It's not it's not some abstract, lovely, gentle Jesus, meek and mild, floating around English pastures green, with a set of lovely, abstract, universal principles that should make us all nice English gentlemen, or gentlewomen. It's a it's the earthiness of life. It's the everydayness. And you read the Hebrew scriptures. It's about how do you live in exile? How do you live the challenges of faith when you're in exile in Babylon and your family have been massacred, and where is God in that? And why did this happen? And how do we sustain faith? And how do we organize our lives? And how do we make it all work? And where's the hope? It's we need that. We need that. It's compelling. It's a better story. And we've only told a part of it for so long, so we need to tell the better story.
I was looking for the author of the book you mentioned, Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes. Kenneth Bailey?
Kenneth Bailey,
Bailey.
Yeah, okay. That's right. Ken Bailey. And he's got his when you read, he's got a whole series of essays on Luke 15, the parable of the prodigal son. Just brilliant.
Oh, yeah?
Amazing. The lost coin, the lost son, the lost sheep. And you read those and you go... Because he spent his life telling those parables in Middle Eastern culture, mostly Arab villages, and they still get it. They get the original impact of the shock of those stories, which are different to reading them here sitting in Balmain in Sydney. You go, oh, that makes no sense. What, So lots to learn from the Middle East.
Yeah. Speaking of lots to learn, tell me about that transition from being an Anglican minister to what you're doing now.
Oh man. Well, I feel like I've been thrust into this role, and that everything in my life, my 30 years running churches, I'm deeply Christian, and Anglican churches at that, so mainstream Anglican churches.
Yeah.
My history, my Jewishness, in fact, my brother became a Muslim. My concerns and background reading in philosophy and theology and sociology and politics and all these, and the fact I've lived in various parts of Africa. I've seen tribalism in Africa, in Zambia. I lived through the civil war in Rhodesia, so I know what it's like to grow up in a country at war. I've seen lots of violence. I've experienced lots of personal violence growing up as a kid. I've lived in Canada. We've lived here. I'm a migrant. All of those things seem to come together. And so I've got a thick skin and I like talking about ideas. I feel like all of this has come together to thrust me into this role to sort of live at all these various boundaries in this kind of, to sound all philosophical, this sort of liminal space that can maybe be useful for Australia at this time, to bring people together and have these conversations and create a better future for the Jewish community here, but for all of us, because what's going on, this is not, anti-Semitism in Australia is not a Jewish problem. I mean, it is a Jewish problem, but it's not just a Jewish problem. It's a problem for all of us, because it's pulling apart the fabric of our cohesion, the fabric of this wonderful country of ours, and saying it's somehow okay to have a group of people in our country who are hated by another group of people. And you go, no, we don't want that. So I feel like I've been thrust into that. But it's making sense of my life in some way. It's not easy. I mean, I get hated by a lot of people because, it's easy to be hated. But it's very exciting to travel around the country and have these conversations and see that that middle 60% of Australia, they love this country, or the 80%, including they love this country. And people just need to be educated and mobilized, and
that's it.
So
Yeah. So Never Again is now. What is it? A movement, a call to action? What do you want the people to know?
Never Again is now. So what is Never Again is now is a grassroots movement that we've set up to work together to ensure that Australia wins this clash of civilization that we're in, that renews our commitment to Western civilization, to our Judeo-Christian values and culture, so that antisemitism, hatred of Jewish people, becomes unthinkable, that we are a country where every Jewish person is safe and free, and Australia broadly remains an unshakable ally of the State of Israel. So we are uniting Christians and Jews and Muslims and secular people and libertarian atheists and anyone who shares that vision of a country safe and free for the Jewish people. And therefore, my hypothesis is, our theory of change is, if Australia is a country where the Jewish community is safe and free, every minority will be safe and free. Because typically the Jews are the canary in the coal mine. When a country is heading towards authoritarianism, and violence is around the corner, it's the Jews who are initially persecuted. So history shows us that. So if the Jews are safe, we're all safe. That's the theory. And so we run rallies, we get everyone together, as you said. In February last year, we had 10,000 people in the domain. We've run these events all around the country. We have chapters, local groups meeting with all these different backgrounds to work together on the singular purpose of renewing our civilization and our culture. So it's very exciting. We're doing media stuff, we're doing corporate stuff, we're doing the grassroots. We really want to get into more churches to educate, particularly the Christians, around the Jewishness of Jesus, the importance of being involved culturally as citizens. So it's very exciting. It's grown very rapidly.
How can people get in contact with you, and how can they support the movement?
Go to our website, neveragainisnow.com.au. All the information's there. Follow us on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the rest of it. Get involved. Sign up with a local chapter. Start a local chapter. If you're living outside the metropolitan cities and you go, I'd love to get a group of people together to stand alongside the Jewish community, to stand for Western civilization, to start thinking and acting together, we'd love to help you get set up, formed into a group, support you and get you engaged. You can, if you're in Sydney in April, we're doing a Passover dinner in the eastern suburbs, bringing Christians and Jewish folk together. So go to our website to find that. If you want to come to Israel with us, we've got a trip in November planned to go to Israel and bring, again, Jewish and non-Jewish folk together to go to the land, explore it politically, see what's going on in Gaza, down on the south, look at some of the sites, go up to the north, and just experience Israel through Christian and Jewish eyes. So invite me to come and speak. If you or not me or one of our other speakers to come to your church, to your corporate event, whatever it is, we've got people who'd love to come and share these ideas and facilitate these conversations.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mark, for what you do. Thank you that you are working towards uniting Australians, to making this a safe place. I really appreciate what you do. If all of us does a little bit that we can, I mean, what you're doing is not a little bit, it's a lot. I really appreciate it. So thank you for that, and thank you for coming on the J Perspective. Your perspective was very, very, for me, moving and informative.
Well, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege, and may the season ahead of you be far more fruitful and wonderful than anything you could hope or imagine or dream of right now.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mark.